What is your name, please?
My name is Marni Nixon.
My name is Marni Nixon.
My name is Marni Nixon.
And these three ladies
The year was 1964. To tell the truth, the TV game show was about to introduce America to one of its most talented singers.
While millions of movie fans have heard my voice in films, few have ever seen my face.
Hello, young lovers, whoever you are.
The person they saw in The King and I, the legendary 1956 movie musical from Rodgers and Hammerstein, was leading lady Deborah Kerr.
Shall we dance on a bright cloud of music? Shall we fly?
But the voice they heard, all 4 octaves of it, was the voice of Marni Nixon. If we listen to these tracks that you have done, are we hearing the same person? Is this Marni Nixon, or is it different for each actress that you're...
Well, it's all Marni Nixon. The whole job of really doing a good dubbing job is if you don't detect that there's any timbre or any difference in pronunciation, that it looks like it's the actress.
Getting to know you, getting to know all about you.
That required hours of study and collaboration, ideally with the performer's cooperation, as was the case with Deborah Kerr.
I would actually stand next to her, side by side, just like another ghost image, watching her movement. We would go to the soundstage and we would record that with the orchestra. Then, when the actual filming of the scene came along, then she had to mouth to that track.
Whenever I feel afraid, I hold my head erect.
Did you have to sign some kind of contract promising to be quiet?
Oh, yes. Yes, I had to sign with all the dubbing things that nobody should ever know. Actually, the studio in the 20th Century Fox at that time with The King and I called me, and they said that if anyone ever knew that I did any part of the dubbing, that they would see to it that I wouldn't work in town again. Ooh. Can you imagine? I was scared to death.
But when word did leak out, it wasn't Nixon, but the star herself who spilled the beans.
The headline of the article was, "Deborah Tells a Secret," and she said my name. She said I only did the high notes, which was not really true.
I got rhythm, I got music.
She didn't start out to be the woman we heard, but rarely saw.
I got Daisy.
Margaret Nixon McKeithron began life in 1930 in Southern California, daughter number 3 of 4, born to parents Charles and Margaret McKeithron. It was the time of the Great Depression, but her father was one of the lucky few who kept his job working for General Motors.
Marni, how old were you when you discovered that you had musical talent?
I was a part of a very musical family, and I think they discovered that by the time I was like 4 years old, that I had perfect pitch and I was very good at singing.
So good that at age 11, Marni Nixon, her stage name, won a singing competition at a state fair that landed her a national radio spot. And when she graduated from high school, Nixon was offered a job at MGM as a messenger girl.
And they were actually going to groom me to be a starlet.
But what they heard impressed them as much as what they saw. It wasn't long before Marni Nixon became what the studios called a ghost.
A ghost, certainly in movie terms, would be somebody who does work like Marni Nixon has always done, that is kind of uncredited.
Robert Osborne, film historian and host of Turner Classic Movies, says it was a common practice during the heyday of movie musicals.
But that wasn't ever particularly talked about because Hollywood didn't want to destroy the illusion that, you know, what they were presenting was not actually what we were seeing.
Nixon started out as the stand-in voice for Margaret O'Brien, the child star of The Secret Garden.
She sang a little Hindu lullaby.
A few years later, her trills could be heard as the voice of Marilyn Monroe in the 1953 movie Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. Then she was the singing voice of Deborah Kerr in the film An Affair to Remember.
Well, singing, I think, is the best way to tell a story, really. It's an abstraction, it's a beauty, it's a long line of things, and you perceive the whole story without even the words sometimes.
A working mother of three and wife to Oscar-winning composer Ernest Gold, Nixon also performed as a concert soprano, doing the music of great composers like Igor Stravinsky. She appeared with Leonard Bernstein on his Concerts for Young People series in 1961.
And I think she is up to something.
As fate would have it, months later, Nixon wound up working with Bernstein again, this time singing for Natalie Wood in West Side Story.
I feel pretty, oh so pretty. I feel pretty and witty and gay.
How was Natalie Wood, what was it like working with her?
Natalie Wood in West Side Story at that point was, she was very standoffish.
Wood had hoped to sing the complicated score herself.
After they had everything filmed, they threw out and told her they were going to throw out her voice, that it wasn't good enough, and that I was going to do the dubbing. And she was very angry. She walked out of the studio.
Leaving Nixon with the challenge of matching her voice to Natalie Wood's on-screen performance.
Today, all day,
I had to try to get her.
The breaths too.
Yes, oh yes, the breath, the pronunciation, and the sound of her voice.
wouldn't it be love?
Nixon's next ghosting project was My Fair Lady, starring Audrey Hepburn.
All I want is a room somewhere far away from the cold night air.
In the case of My Fair Lady, was that also a deep, dark secret?
Oh, yes, yes. Now, it was years later from King and I, so it was not such a guarded secret that this process was even going on in the movies at that point. So people were now curious about who was doing the dubbing, because they really hadn't known Audrey Hepburn to be a singer.
I could have danced all night. I could have danced all night.
Once again, Nixon kept mum about her role. Still, when Audrey Hepburn was passed over for an Oscar nomination, some speculated that was the reason.
I think Audrey was very disappointed that it got out. I think she wanted it to be protected more.
Marni Nixon's ghosting days came to an end in 1965, when she began a new life, a life on screen in The Sound of Music, playing Sister Sophia opposite Julie Andrews.
She'd outpester any pest, drive a hornet from its nest.
Finally, she wasn't just heard, she was seen. Still, it's for her work behind the scenes, as the singing voice of some of the greatest actresses of our time, that Marni Nixon can take a well-deserved bow.
I think she definitely has a place in film history, and I think, if anything, Marni Nixon deserves a place in film history as a representative of all those people who did wonderful dubbing through the years.
Shall we dance? The rain in Spain stays mainly in the plain.
Will the real Marni Nixon please stand up
and sing us a